welcome back to another episode of Pep Talk, the Parent Experience Podcast. I'm Kayla, joined with my co-host.
I'm Robert.
And we're super excited to be back to give you a pep talk for another month.
It's another month, another pep talk, and we're excited to give you guys some encouragement. So before we dive into things, just got to let you guys know that you can help this podcast get to more people. So wherever you're listening at, you can just share the link, text it to a friend, and help this podcast get to more people so that it can encourage them in their parenting journey. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, engage with the content. That helps it gets out to more people as well. So, Kayla, what are we talking about this month?
This month, we're talking about kindness.
Kindness.
I love it, especially with Valentine's Day this month. And, there's just lots of opportunity to show kindness. And so we're talking about kindness with our kids. We're going to be reading stories from Jesus about how Jesus was just radically kind to people. I mean, he just went out of his way and lived life kindly, but not like shy, It wasn't like he just was bashful away from things. He just was outrageously kind.
I would say that defines him very well.
Yeah,
kind.
I would too. Yeah. It's like it's a fruit of the Spirit.
It's like it is.
Did it? Ching? Yeah. But so we're talking about kindness. The kids are going to memorize Colossians 3:12. You are God's chosen people. So put on tender kindness and mercy. And so that's going to be really great. We're also talking about the story of Ruth and Naomi, which a lot of our families did not know. I asked tonight for a raise of hands, and a lot of people did not raise their hands. So I'm really excited to read about the story of Ruth.
Yeah, you guys can look forward to that.
Yeah, so it's going to be an awesome month. And we are joined tonight with our FX speakers, Mandy King and her son, Zach. So would you guys say hey?
What's up?
Hey. We're super excited to have you on the podcast. And so, Mandy, would you tell us a little bit about your family? What do you guys do? Who are your kids? And so on.
Well, I'm feeling so legit. This is my first podcast.
Yes.
It's a great experience so far. Okay, so I'm Mandy King. I'm married to Sean, and this is my oldest son, Zach. And then we have 3 daughters, Grace, Chloe, and Sophia. And my journey a little bit is stayed at home, raised my kids, and then went back to school about 3 years ago to get my clinical mental health degree. And so now I'm doing counseling with City Care here at New Life.
Yeah, it's been such a great addition to have you on the team, Mandy. We love you. I think the community loves you. It's just been awesome to have you on the team. So how long have you guys been a part of New Life? So not working as a counselor, but as a family, this has been your church.
Born here.
Born and raised.
Yeah.
In the service.
Tried and true. So I started, Sean was raised in the church, and he is older than me. So
that was very kind.
Did you? Yeah. Wasn't that?
Kind.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I would say we've been married 28 years. So as a family, we've been here 28 years. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So tonight we are talking about how to raise kind kids. Man, that's a big challenge. How do we raise kind kids? Man, and we want our kids to be confident. We don't want them to just shy away from things, but we want them to be kind because that does reflect Jesus and his character. And that's our goal. We just want to keep raising our kids to know God, to love God, and to become good reflections of God. And so being kind is one of those options. So, Mandy, you shared some great things tonight about how to raise our kids to be kind. Zach, you gave us some great perspective from the kids' point of view, especially in challenging situations. So that was one of the things we talked about was when you're faced with challenging situations, your kid starts to act up. How can we help them to redirect and to be kind? So you shared some great things of the very first thing we should look at with our kids' behavior.
Yeah, and that is biologically. So what is going on in their little bodies, right? So so many times when kids start to act out or, just out of character or just, we don't know what's going on. I think the first thing we need to do is, are you hungry? Is there a chance their blood sugar is low? Is there a chance that they haven't eaten for 3 or 4 hours? We know as adults, we need to eat every 2 to 3 hours. So kids with, metabolisms that are off the charts, they need to be getting some snacks in them way more than, 3 or 4 hours. So I think sometimes it's good to just say, wait a second, before we address the behavior, let's address the biological things that could be going on, such as needing a snack.
So are you saying that hangry is actually a real thing?
I think it is.
Wow.
I think it is. Yes. And I will say, when I was raising my kids, I didn't think about it. It was always, you'll ask me later, but it was always behavior first, not really paying attention to, could they be hungry? Are they overstimulated? Are they carrying something from the day that hurt their feelings and they've been ruminating on it all day? So yeah, things like that. I think it's a good start to address the biological needs first.
Yeah. And so, one of the things we talked about a little bit about tonight too was in very high intense emotion situations. Mm-hmm. Those are really good opportunities to show kindness. So I'm talking about like a dance recital, all eyes are on the kids, someone messes up or misses their cue, which then can be devastating, to the kid performing, or in sports. They're out in the middle of the basketball court and we're getting ready, or it's wrestling and they missed this one spot. There's so many things. These are really high, intense emotions. What's something you would say to a parent that wants to help their kid reflect Jesus's kindness in those really high, intense emotional moments?
Yeah. Well, I think, again, it starts with biological, that we're checking in. We're kind of going through a checklist, right? Do you need something to eat? And then it's, moving down to, when we talk about kindness, we have to make sure they know what kindness is. We can't assume that they know what that is, right? I mean, I'm sure it's been talked about at home at some point, or act kind or whatever. Well, break it down and let them repeat it back to you. What are they hearing you say? What is their perspective on what kindness is, and how does that look in their little world, right? And so then we have an anchor to come back to. Remember, we talked about kindness and what that looks like. So if we give our kids something to draw from, then that can be our focal point. So when we're in high emotions, I'll use Zach as an example. So he was very competitive, still is competitive. And so we really saw this come out when he was playing basketball. I think you were alluding, if you want to share that story, I can add to it about what went wrong.
I don't remember a lot, but I was seeing red. I was in 5th grade. So
we need to hear this story.
Oh, we were at a basketball tournament not far from here, Minden, Nebraska, and this was Dad's first year coaching me in a competitive environment, and it was just a battle. I just remember being so frustrated with Dad, and Dad, coaching me up all the time, and it was a deal. Anyways, this tournament, man, I got, I think we were going down the court, and, the ball got passed to the other side, and this kid just body checked me, and I lost it. I totally lost it. I just remember trying to throw him into the wall, and then I was pulling back my fist and about to let one loose, and someone grabbed me. I don't remember, but yeah, that's all I remember. Maybe you have more.
I can remember being in the stands, being mortified that this was my child behaving like this. Just like, where did this come from, right? Now, never mind that Sean and I are competitive. That has nothing to do with what's going on here, right? But I remember just being so embarrassed, more about me, how that made me look, and not about what he was going through. But it was a wake-up call for us, because it was like, at the mind, I didn't have verbiage for it, but he did not know how to regulate his emotions. Like he had talked about today or earlier, a lot of times kids in sports are experiencing these intense emotions for the first time, and if they're not, let's say maybe called out on it in that moment, well, what does the brain remember? When I get injustice on the court, I act out. So then we do that next time, and we do that next time, right? So unless we're intervening and saying, whoa, time out, that's not okay behavior.
Right. And I feel like, now that I think about that, I definitely think patterns are a big thing. And if you don't interrupt that in your child, because that was just, I don't even know where it came from. I think it just happened. And I'm like, oh, this feels good when I express myself like this. And I think that became a pattern. So that's kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah, there's truth to it. So, and even in therapy, a lot of times what we're doing is we're working on retraining the brain, right? Because we've created neural pathways as to how we respond to something. So, for example, with you feeling injustice And you, knowing your personality, Zach is very justice driven. And so when things aren't right, that's a hot button for him. And that was an example of that. And so as a parent, being able to, one, know his personality, it took me time, obviously, to figure this out, but recognizing, whoa, this is a pattern that we've got to interrupt. So, if you were to ask me, how did we talk him down? It was probably more out of disappointment, right? That probably wasn't the right way to do it. But it was, Sean and I both were like, what on earth just happened here? So a little shock. But I know that we did have conversations about, number one, Zach, you represent Jesus in everything you do. We don't get to put him on the sidelines and go behave like, an animal because we're playing a sport, I remember talking about that, and you're representing yourself, and then you represent your mom and dad. So with that, would I recommend that now? I don't know. I think there's some truth to it, but that could also lead to performance driven. And like you mentioned earlier, if we're focused on the performance and not on the emotion, we're going to miss we have potential to miss some key opportunities for interruption.
Yeah, and I feel like, maybe some of that anger was from, like Dad told me to do this after the game, I need to do this. Oh, I failed. Now it's all downhill. Now I'm frustrated. Now we're spiraling. And I think as a kid, you just, unless you have, a parent to help regulate that, it's very difficult.
Yeah. And I think ways that we do, when our kids are heightened like that, we talked about the nervous system. We have to understand that they're getting massive amounts of cortisol being released. That is a stress hormone. Adults don't handle that. Why would kids be able to handle that? So being able to say, here's kind of what's going on. How do we bring them down? Deep breathing is a big deal. And I know that can sound cliche, but it's evidence-based that when we practice deep breathing, which means, for example, box breathing, we breathe in for 4 seconds, we hold it for 4 seconds, we release it for 4 seconds. We pause, we do it again, breathe in for 4 seconds, and we repeat that. And what that does is that resets the nervous system, calms everything down, so then we can start using the coping skills that mom and dad have talked to us about, such as, maybe going for a walk around the gym. Maybe we need to go get something to eat. Maybe we need to just have a little quiet. Maybe we need to isolate ourselves for a minute to calm everything down. And that depends on your kid, what works for them. Some of them might not do well being alone. Others, like Zach, he did well with that. It's like, take some space, right? And I would say you're still that way today.
Yeah.
That's how you reset. Yeah. So
I love that. I heard recently with young kids, a great way to help them reset, to start learning how to regulate. They use the acronym PET, like imagining a little pet that brings them comfort, like their dog or their cat. But the P stands for pause, right? Pause. Like you were saying, take that big breath. The E stands for exhale, like get it all out. Just let your body relax in the exhale. And then T is for talk. So just pet. Like, think of your little dog, think of your little cat. Like, obviously, when they get older, they're probably not thinking that. But for young kids, okay, imagine you're holding your little kitty or whatever animal you love. And, pause, take a deep breath. Let's exhale. And now let's talk it out. Yes. And I think, like you said, sometimes just that reset is going to help us act in a kinder way. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, the goal is we are trying to teach our kids kindness, and it's not just kindness. We're trying to teach them all the fruits of the Holy Spirit, or the fruits of the Spirit that the Holy Spirit helps us with. And so I think if we get just, if we can understand how we regulate our emotions, implement kindness, then that, of course, carries over into, other areas of their life. When we can regulate emotions, that's going to help us with gentleness. Right. And patience and of course, kindness. So,
yeah, you were mentioning earlier something that we wanted to talk about here in the podcast was what you were calling about grounding techniques. Was it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1?
Yes.
Is that what it was?
Yes.
Could you share that with our parents? Kind of what is the grounding techniques? When do you use it? And then just kind of explaining what those are.
Yeah, so grounding techniques is another coping skill that we use to regulate emotions. And oftentimes, just to kind of help bring ourselves back to center or present. If we have little worriers, tomorrow I have this test, and tomorrow I got to worry about this, and their little minds start to race. let's take some deep breaths. What can we focus on right now? And so then we implement the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the grounding techniques. And I always have to cheat because I can never remember it. But it's 5 things we can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And you could, you could download this off the internet, but put it in your car. So it's a great conversation piece. If you're picking kids up from school or you're picking kids up from practice and they're a little heightened or they're starting to worry about what tomorrow brings or maybe something later that night, hey, let's do our 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? And that's something that everybody could do kind of together. And it's really a distraction tool, which is another technique in trying to regulate emotions.
Great. So if you aren't watching the podcast right now, Mandy shared that in the video, so you can do that on Spotify or on YouTube, but we'll also put a link to the photo in the show notes for you, so you can resource it there.
Zach, I want to give you a chance to speak to this too. If there was, like, looking back at your sports and your competitive nature, what would you say maybe to a parent that has a kid that is highly, highly competitive? That now looking back at your experience, what's something that you would say to a parent that they could do to help their kid with that competitive spirit and in those moments of high emotion?
Yeah. Man, there's a lot of different things. I think that, I touched on this tonight, but I think the moment after, especially like a sporting event, kids, their brains got to just be firing all sorts of different things. And I think that, as a parent, that's a crucial time. Like, are you going to machine gun them with a bunch of questions or critiques, or are you just going to, hey, it was a great game, positive affirmations, what'd you think, type of thing, and instead of, hey, like, why didn't you pass the ball this way, or maybe you should do this, or you should do this. I know that, like, for me, that I witnessed a little bit of that, and I knew it was coming from a good place, now, in the moment, you're a kid and you're just like, I don't want to hear you talk right now. It's, but I think, man, this is like, it's a lot of thinking, but, I think for me, once I understood, my value and where it came from, and just from those conversations that I had with my parents, at night, like, hey, we love you. And like knowing that helped me deal with those things. But I think for a parent, as long as you can just nurture your kid instead of focusing on the performance, I think that that's such a huge thing. And then knowing when the right time is to talk about, okay, how could have we done those things better, rather than just focusing on, so rather than just focusing on the performance, just, talking about the emotions and nurturing them through that. So,
yeah, I love that. Mandy had mentioned tonight how it was important when you're recorrecting to make it a quick point, make sure they understand it makes sense, but then like go try it out. Don't just sit there and keep dogging on one point for a long time. And I think that that's just a really good parenting tip for our parents too. Like, hey, get in there, do your constructive help in helping them figure out, like, how should I have responded? Make it play therapy, right? Like, let's play this out again. Let's like retry this situation with our action figures, right? Like, we can do things like that. But then to help them process that without it feeling really heavy on their shoulders.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's great. Well, we are coming towards the end of our podcast here. So to wrap things up, wanted to ask you, Mandy, just answer the last question that we always ask on the podcast. And this is really just to help those parents to get a little bit further ahead than maybe you are, and to learn maybe from some of the pain that you've had to go through in parenting. So the question is just this, given your parenting experience, what's something that you've learned that you wish you would have learned sooner in your parenting?
For any parent, that is such a loaded question.
Yeah.
Because I think there's so many things that run through our mind. But the first thing when you asked me that earlier, I was like, calm down, Mandy. You don't have to do everything right with your kids. You're not going to do it perfect, right? Allowing God's grace to come in and not feel like I had to do everything on my own, and feel like I had to create, the perfect atmosphere, the perfect kid, the perfect conversation, the perfect, I was very performance driven and did not recognize that. And it came across later, it was a conversation Zach and I had and said, Mom, I grew up feeling like everything had to be perfect. I had to do everything right. And I had no idea that's what I was communicating until I did my own work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how can a parent get better at that?
Yeah. So I think one is don't focus on your performance. It's not about raising perfect kids. It's not about doing the whole process perfectly. Enlisting a good support system. My husband was great in that he always said, did you tell him that you loved him? Well, yeah. Okay, let it go. Let things go, And so just, I'm kind of an intense person anyway, and so I don't really do anything halfway. And I think that kind of, if I would tell a parent right now, is just love your kids, be present, right? And let their little personalities come out, and you come alongside them and do life together instead of performing. So
that's so good.
I hope that made sense.
Yeah, it did. I love that. That's great. Man, well, what an awesome episode, you guys. Thanks for sharing vulnerably. I'm going to be thinking about that basketball court story, all month when we're talking about kindness. But
yes.
Yeah, no, this was a great episode. So thanks for sharing, you guys. And we loved having you on the podcast today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so just remember, parents, you're doing a great job. Keep raising amazing kids that know and love God. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Bye.